Organizations routinely spend months deploying all 93 controls listed in the ISO 27001 Annex, only to fail their compliance audits. The failure originates at the starting line. Practitioners frequently initiate their security design directly from a standardized list, rather than assessing their specific operational reality. This top-down pipeline treats the standard as an absolute menu rather than a framework. This diagram illustrates the mechanical failure of that approach. Forcing a monolithic block of 93 generic controls onto a unique organizational structure creates immediate friction. The system breaks down because the applied controls are completely divorced from the actual threats facing the business. Treating the Annex as a checklist leads directly to security theater. Budgets evaporate on deploying complex solutions for threats that do not exist in the organization's environment, while highly specific vulnerabilities remain exposed.
Governance becomes an exercise in checking boxes. Compliance requires the exact opposite workflow. You must organically derive your controls from specific analyzed risks, and only then test that resulting architecture against the standard. To build that architecture correctly, we have to establish the exact functions of the 4 core components of the ISO 27000 framework. This matrix shows how they interlock. ISO 27001, ISO 27002, Annex A, and the Statement of Applicability. ISO 27001 sits at the top. This is the mandatory requirement standard. It dictates exactly what your information security management system must achieve to earn certification. Directly beneath it is ISO 27002. This is not a certifiable standard. It is an instruction manual containing implementation guidelines, explaining how to properly execute the controls once you decide you need them. On the horizontal axis is Annex A. Its function is strictly comparative. It acts as a safety net used only at the end of the risk assessment process to ensure nothing was overlooked. The distinction between a requirement, a guideline, and a comparative reference is the operational baseline for navigating an audit successfully. Confusing these roles guarantees structural flaws in your security system. The mechanism that connects these components is Clause 6.1.3. This clause serves as the operational bridge, converting the theoretical risk assessment required by Clause 6.1.2 into an active deployment of security controls. This flowchart details the mandated sequence. It begins on the left by identifying a specific risk under Clause 6.1.2, moving into a broad treatment option, like mitigating or accepting the risk, and then pointing directly to the selection of necessary controls. Look closely at the inputs feeding into the control selection node. The data comes from the risk identification phase, completely bypassing Annex A. The initial selection of controls must be driven entirely by the organization's internal context and operational reality. Only after you have independently selected your controls does the flowchart expand to the right. Here, the internal controls move into a verification gate to be formally compared against the Annex A list. Because this process starts internally, many necessary controls will originate from outside the ISO framework. You might require bespoke operational technology isolations or specific configurations dictated by local data privacy laws. Clause 6.1.3 operates as a validation mechanism. It ensures no critical gaps exist in a risk treatment plan that you have already built, rather than serving as a catalog you order controls from. Let's apply this pipeline to a practical scenario. This diagram maps a sensitive web portal facing a high-severity risk. We have an exposed web node connecting to a central database, creating a clear threat vector for unauthorized access due to weak authentication protocols. To mitigate this threat, the security team evaluates the architecture and selects a series of controls internally, well before consulting the ISO standard. Based on the threat vector, they decide to implement multi-factor authentication, institute a rigorous review of access rights, and deploy a strict management protocol for privileged accounts. With the defense plan built, the team executes the mechanical comparison. This visual maps the 3 internally selected controls against the full scrolling list of 93 controls in Annex A, scanning for functional matches. As the scrolling stops, the red highlight reveals Control 5.16, Identity Lifecycle Management. The internal team focused heavily on blocking external attacks, but entirely missed the protocol for handling the accounts of departing employees. Finding this gap proves the exact intended value of Annex A. It functions as a diagnostic safety net,
catching a critical oversight in the organization's logic long before an external auditor arrives. The results of this derivation pipeline must be recorded in the Statement of Applicability, or SOA. This document serves as the ultimate governance ledger of your information security management system. This ledger visualizes the exact data structure required for compliance. Every entry populates these columns: reference, control, decision, justification, and implementation status. Zooming in highlights a vital distinction. Under the decision column, the control is marked necessary, but the implementation status is marked not implemented. An organization will not fail certification simply because a necessary control is currently unimplemented. As long as the unexecuted control is formally tracked with a timeline and resources in your risk treatment plan, the governance remains intact. Conversely, if your risk assessment dictates that a specific control from Annex A is completely unnecessary for your environment, you must provide a documented, objective justification based on your precise scope and risk profile. The SOA functions as a dynamic, highly defensible governance ledger. It reflects the exact reality of the organization's security posture at any given moment, rather than serving as a static binary checklist. From the perspective of the auditor evaluating this system, the focus narrows entirely to the connections between these documents. This glowing thread illustrates the auditor's primary objective: verifying bidirectional traceability. They will trace the logic backwards, moving from the physical evidence of effectiveness, back through the SOA, back through the Annex A comparison, and finally anchoring at the original risk assessment. If an organization outsources a controls execution to a third-party vendor, it remains on the SOA. The organization always retains the burden of verifying its effectiveness and supplying the evidence. To build a defensible architecture, you must start with the risks, derive the necessary controls organically, verify them against Annex A, document the logic in your SOA, execute the plan, and continuously measure the results.